Well, hello everyone. This is Susan for SLC Aquatics and Cassie from KassCeeBee YouTube channel, welcoming you into the live stream this morning. We want to welcome you and want you to feel comfortable in chat. I ask you to share this out and to click that like button. Today's topic is confusion in the hobby, when to ask for help. Help all the time. Because we're ever learning. Cassie, you got anything on your heart this morning? You want to get started, or you want to wait till the audience builds, or it's up to you.
I don't know where to start because we were talking before, and I was like, how did we get started?
Yeah, we were talking about when is the time to ask for help, and you were getting frustrated with some situations in your own personal fish room, and I think that's how we got started.
I do. So I will get um, looking at my tanks, and I do try to take a time to look at them. I think that's important. Um, but sometimes when you do that, then you see things you don't want to see. But and it goes in like a cycle where bad things will happen, and then it like kind of you can reset it, I guess, maybe with a water change, and everything's good for a while. Um, and then it just seems like stuff happens, or I'll add fish, and honestly, like I don't I don't know what's causing some of the fish loss. I get a lot of it in my 20-gallon setup. Um, but time goes on, and I don't record everything I do. And I think I react a lot, like I mentioned before. And just when I react, I tend to do one, two, and three things. And then something happens, and I don't know which of those things caused it. And when I look back, I'm like, tends to be when I'm having problems is just from sometimes reacting, and then I don't know what to pinpoint it to. So I do like the hands-off approach, and just maybe do a small water change, but then don't do anything and see what happens, instead of trying to do like I'll hear things too. I'll hear people say, because I'll see some stuff's going on. Like I try to keep the mollies. I like to have the balloon mollies, but I've struggled with that fish in particular. And I know they need like calcium. So I
Okay.
know what my water is. I'm not exactly sure that I have the best water for them or not. And, can you just amend it with like, the live rock, the coral, what do you call that? The aragonite.
The Ragonite. Mm-hmm.
So I looked into that stuff. I've added the aragonite in the 20, and it's been a year since having that addition. And then recently I saw LRB, and he was doing the powdered eggshell. So I did crush up my own eggshells. I just rinsed them out. I didn't sanitize them,
Mm-hmm.
and I sprinkled that on to all of, I think, all of the aquariums. I just gave a tiny sprinkle. Um, it's just like a small amount. You don't think that would harm anybody, but just try to do what he recommended.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I did a water change, and then I added a liquid fertilizer, which I don't do that often unless I see like my crypts are looking a little translucent, and some of my plants are starting to look translucent.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe it's time to do that. And then I lost a fish. I'm like, what caused it?
Yeah.
Was it the extra water change I did? Was it the eggshell, or was it the liquid iron? So um,
Well,
I looked
you've brought up some big points right here, and I'm going to ask you to pause
sure.
because I want the audience to also know in chat that if you have questions or input, you can also feel free to enter that in chat, and we will take our time to get to these questions and comments and also um, interject on what your issues may be. Um, Cassie, you said you added aragonite about a year ago, and I wanted to know how is that aquarium doing now since you added aragonite to your aquarium?
So I was getting baby fish from the platies that I had in there. And then I noticed like the baby fish were like dying off. I don't remember. I think one of the fish was displaying some like an odd shape um, that I didn't notice before. So I didn't know if he was like they were getting like a sickness, and that's when um, Alex recommended adding in the aragonite. So I sprinkled that in. But that fish might have died, but then I didn't have any other fish loss after that. And then I decided to I couldn't keep the babies. I couldn't really grow them up. Like they never grew up very fast. So and then just I struggle with babies and getting them to grow. So I don't know if they just weren't getting enough food, if I wasn't feeding regularly and consistently enough. Um, but I decided just to give them away. I was tired of the platies, and I really wanted to go back to the balloon mollies and give them a try again.
Uh-huh.
So about 2 or 3, maybe more months ago, I tried to get just, um, I tried to get a good mix of female to male ratio. And I ended up getting, I think, 2 males and 2 females. And I was like, okay, I didn't realize one was a male until I got home. So I went back and tried to get the ratio right. Um, but yeah, they slowly, within a couple weeks, one of the males had died. And then I had the 3 females and 1 male for up until now. And then I lost one, and I was like, well, maybe I just waited too long between water changes. So I normally do my water change like once a month. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and like in that tank I'm talking about is my 20 gallon. I had it set up with like 3 inches of gravel, and then I topped it off with just some pool filter sand,
Yeah.
about like an inch to 2 inches. And there's driftwood with anubias in there, so I have like 3 pieces of driftwood in there, and
Do you know what kind of driftwood?
it's whatever they put the anubias on here by me. Um, it's
Mopani
it's
or
thick. It's really thick. I don't know that it had a name to it. It's probably Mapani, but I'm not sure.
okay.
But I get a lot of brown debris at the bottom around the driftwood, so I think it's just decomposing, and it's just, it'll, I guess that's what we call malm in the hive.
Yes, the brown mold. Yep.
So, and I didn't know if it's just like the nerite snails I have in there that munch on it that are creating that waste. Would I have that waste with snails or without them? I don't know. So,
Yeah. If I overfeed in my deep substrate is when I get the brown mold. And I do have a piece of driftwood in there, but it's ash. And it was handmade by a veteran locally here in Alabama. And it hardly has any decomposing to it at all. The wood has darkened since I soaked it until it sunk because it floated really bad at first. Um, the type of driftwood that we put in our aquariums, even though we have boiled off a lot of the tannins, it still can leach enough acids into our water column to bring our pH levels down. And if you do naturally have hard water, which I do have hard water, but I have low pH, and sometimes um, the low pH comes from the age of my pipes and not necessarily what my local water company has put into the water. So a lot of things factor with different species of live bearers as well as other freshwater fish. And the most success that we can have is what actually thrives and reproduces in our waters naturally without us adding anything to change what comes out of our tap. And you undoubtedly had problems with platies, but if you speak to other live bearers, platies can be a problem. And those balloon mollies, also being a live bearer, can have its own issues with that species. Depends on whether they're wild caught or tank bred. And a lot of the balloon mollies, I do believe, are tank bred now. And I don't know if they have a genetic alteration from the original molly or not. And some mollies do better in a salt water or a brackish water setting. So, have you tried any of those changes?
So I had like 6 bumblebee gobies in there, and I did try to make it like a little bit, tiny bit brackish, but because the plants are in there, I was like, I can't make it too
Mm-hmm.
much. So, um, I added, I used to, and I stopped doing it, but I was adding just like maybe an eighth a cup of the salt for them, and that seemed to be helping them. And then since I stopped doing that, I noticed like one by one they're like dropping off. So, but I didn't want to see my plants melting away either. So it's like, well, I talked to my pet store, and they were saying like they don't need the brackish water; they should be fine in the fresh water. So that was the advice I was given from them. I won't buy them again because I don't want to keep brackish water.
Yeah.
I've got one left, but he looks like he's petering out now too. So,
Well, if anybody in chat has had any experience with any of these freshwater fish that Cassie's talking about, or if you suffer also sometimes with the frustration of seeing a problem in our aquariums that have not had a problem for a long time, and then our reaction in as I think is instinctively to try to do something. And I know some older experienced fish keepers will say, first of all, just do a water change and then observe your aquarium. And I've kept guppies for a very long time, but I don't have them as much anymore. I'm trying different species. But after a water change, sometimes is where I had more die off. And the adults died, but the fry thrived because people have told me that the fry that are born in your water are already acclimated to that water. The adults sometimes struggle because of going through different changes in different waters in different people's hands. So,
yeah, and I have a baby Molly in there right now, and so going back to the water change, sometimes I'll see their tails get a little bit, like depleted. How do you say it when you just see bits of the tail kind of missing on the
yeah,
edge? Um, and I'm like,
something's
oh,
eating away at their fins. Yeah, some kind
so
of acid or bacteria maybe in the water.
mm, so I don't treat with for bacterial at all. Like I have in the past, and I've had fish loss, so I try to keep it like as clean and unaltered by me as possible.
Yeah.
um, like I I don't know that I've done the methylene blue. I don't think. Um, Maybe when I first started, I did the methylene blue for the goldfish, but since then I haven't used it. But anyways, so I just look at that. I'm like, I test my water with my test strip, and my test strip does not have ammonia on it. And I don't know if everyone
Mm-mm.
else's test strips are that
Nope,
way, but
they don't. You
um,
have to buy ammonia strips now.
they don't have ammonia on there. So that's the one thing that I can't test for. I'm like, is there ammonia in the water? Because my nitrates and nitrites on the strips always read 0.
Hmm.
I don't necessarily trust the strips because it'll say my carbonate hardness. It doesn't even have a color that matches. So I'm like, well, I have tested that with liquid, my own liquid test kit, so I know what that is, and I know that I have like a high carbonate carbonate hardness, but
Okay.
a low GH. So I have soft water with a high buffer for my pH. So my pH, I shouldn't get swings really with the high carbonates that are in there. But yeah, I do have the softer water. Um, I don't know if that is good for the mollies. Um, Anyways, so back to the water change. I'm like, well, what is causing this? Because the test strips don't really show that anything is wrong in my water.
Mm-hmm.
So I've looked into probably getting, going ahead and getting like a full liquid test kit and just seeing what that is. But I hate doing the liquid drops
Yeah,
and stuff.
you and me
It's so
both. I like the
expensive.
instant quick stuff, but like you said, it's not always accurate. I put
Yeah.
on the screen Genevieve's response to if your nitrates are zero, perhaps the cycle crashed. And I know on our test strips, there is no ammonia uh, testing on test strips, but the thing that I've discovered that if I have nitrites, there's probably ammonia in the tank because nitrites, I do believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the beginning process of ammonia breakdown and conversion in the aquarium. If you don't have at least 20 ppm of nitrates, as Jenna says, your cycle probably has crashed. Thank you, Jenna, for that comment. I do appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for
Um,
thanks
Go
for
ahead.
commenting. So yeah, I heard though from like people, well-known fish tubers. I've watched their videos, and they have the catchy titles like "What's causing the cloudy water." Um, and I usually just ignore those because I don't get cloudy water. So like, I guess I'll watch it just to see what it's all about.
Yeah.
And like the one guy was getting cloudy water in several of his tanks, and um, he had tested, and I guess he had ammonia in there. So he was saying like what to do if that happens if you have high ammonia levels. And I was like, well, I don't have the cloudy water, so I don't think I really have ammonia. And I might have asked at one time, like, can you get like an ammonia spike without even being able to measure it?
Hmm.
So I think that's possible, but it would be nice if something was measurable. So you could know, we're humans and we like information. And when you don't have any, but the only thing you have is like a visual that your fish doesn't look the healthiest it normally looks, it's nice to know what's the cause, especially if you haven't done anything in a while other than just haven't changed the water. And
Well, the
so,
cloudiness in the water basically is just a bacterial bloom, but you
mm,
have to understand what's causing the bacterial bloom. Have you had a species increase? Have you been overfeeding? Have you not been doing your water changes? Is your filtration media perhaps wearing out and not producing the beneficial bacteria that is needed to break down the columns of solids that are within the column, the water column itself. So we had a comment from the Nano Aquarium guy saying why you can't put the ammonia test on the same strips because it will mess with the results. And Silver Creek just now said that unless you're using a dropper and just dropping water on each individual segment, he didn't finish his statement. But
I guess he's talking about the ammonia.
yeah, yeah.
Just
Um,
the ammonia first and then go back and test the rest.
yes. But a lot of us, if we just test ammonia, we're like, okay, I'm not testing for anything else. If I have ammonia, I know I just need to do a water change.
And
But
that's
a
the
lot
one
of
thing I
times,
don't test for because they'll often tell you like you really don't need to, because if your bacteria is in there, it'll convert it to, I think, what, nitrites, and then
yes,
that will be converted to nitrates, and your cycle is complete.
yes.
So they usually tell you you don't have to test for it. But and, I mean, it's just something I don't have, and it'd be nice to go out, and I should probably just go get it just to, I keep saying. That's the one thing I
To
don't
me,
have. I
I
haven't
use the
tested for.
ammonia strips mostly when I'm setting up new aquariums. And even though I'm setting up new aquariums and using seeded media to cycle the aquarium, I still do I use API products instead of Seacom products, and I use the API Stress Coat and Stress Zyme for my first probably 2 or 3 water changes because during those water changes, I'm not doing weekly water changes unless I'm seeing ammonia. And then I'm going to be doing every 2 to 3 days some small 10%, 20% water changes on a new aquarium because the beneficial bacteria is growing and being fed not only by the fish poop, but the feedings that I'm giving them. And I don't use carbon in my filtration, activated carbon, like I used to.
Hmm.
I'm not sure how that chemical actually responds. I know it's supposed to remove medications and heavy metals out of your aquarium water because when we're doing treatments for parasites and things like that, you want to remove the activated carbon from your filtration or it will take the medicine out.
Right. Hmm. Well,
Yeah.
I used to use it as well. And then I switched to what, I saw that video Corey did on like how do you get the most out of your HOB. And at that point, I think I stopped using it and I kind of switched some things around. Um, and then heard something else, lava rock is good in there. So instead of using like the bio rings, like lava rock can house more beneficial bacteria or at least the same amount. I don't know.
Yeah,
Who
it's got
knows?
more holes for more beneficial
Who knows about that
bacteria.
stuff? And
Yeah.
then a good friend, Sharpie was like, you don't need that much. I forgot what he said, but he said it was like overkill. Um, and then you hear people say, like Lucas Bretz. I've been watching. I started with Corey, and I went to Lucas, um, and then I wanted to do more of a planted aquarium, and then I went to Father Fish and just fell in love with his aquarium, and I was like, well, how can I set it up that way?
Hmm.
So, after working and talking with Father Fish, I used a lot of his advice. Um, but yeah, I was telling you earlier, I was like, you get told like this is okay. So if you do like, I think he recommended 2 inches of sand, or at minimum, and
Yeah.
3 is better. He would say. So I was always like, well, which is it? Is it 2 or 3? I
Yeah, I
wanted to
just kept imagining in my head, pretty soon my tank's going to be full of sand and I'm not going to have any room for water for
right.
fish to swim in.
Yeah, or plants to grow.
Hmm.
Because I had gotten the 40-gallon breeder based off of Corey's recommendation. Like, if you're not going to keep a lot of tanks, this is the tank I would get. So I
Hmm.
got the 40-gallon breeder, did the deep substrate, and then added some swords, which said they could get up to 24 inches high, but 12 to 24 inches. And I was like, well, hopefully they'll stay on the small side. But they didn't. They got humongous.
And,
Um,
and
and
probably
then
grew out the top of the aquarium.
Yeah, and then I made the video on the giant sword plant that's growing in my aquarium, and I had 3 in there. So I guess I took the one out, and I was left with 2. And I don't know if I'm going on 3 years now with that aquarium, but the swords are the easiest plants to grow. I don't
Right.
have really an issue with those unless it's
To
the
me, they
dwarf
have a
sword.
very strong root source that
Yes,
just,
they can get through your medium.
yes.
So, but I'm having issues with the smaller plants. And then, so I'm lately been thinking a lot about the substrate layers. I've been thinking more and more about it. And, um, I didn't pay too much attention other than being reassured that what I was adding was okay. The grain size was fine. Um, but yeah, there's confusion. There's confusion because of what some people say and what others say. and then I don't always say the right thing. And like I know
Because we don't know what we're describing. We have a problem.
it's funny. No, I mean, I just to talk about sand is funny.
Oh,
Like I was using, I didn't start out with pool filter sand. I started out with the powdery sand from Carib Sea, and
yeah,
you know what? Lucas loves that stuff, and I moved away from it early on because I couldn't keep the plants from floating out of
hmm,
it.
yeah,
They would not anchor down in there. So I moved away from it and went to the pool filter sand. And I kind of stressed about that a bit because some people didn't like the pool filter sand. And I
yeah.
was like, well, is my pool filter sand in Florida different from what, the pool filter sand is in Washington? Probably.
Yeah.
So I don't think they're the same. Because I've heard people say pool filter sand is a small granule. I'm like, yeah, this one's not that
It's not
small.
powder fine. Uh-uh.
No, it's a lot bigger than the powder. Um,
I
I would
tried
say it's
the
bigger than
play.
most sands.
I tried play sand to begin
Hmm.
with when I started like 5 or 6 years ago, and swore up and down that I would never use it again because you cannot get it clean.
Yeah.
You, you know, and I had crayfish at the time who just kept things stirred up all the time, and of course that sand got into the water column. Next thing you know, you've burned up the propellers on your filters.
Mm.
That's when I was using hang on the back. Most of my aquariums, except for maybe one or two, have nothing but sponge filters in there because of having sand on top of gravel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask you to pause right quick because Jenna has an input
Because
about.
I can
Well,
just keep talking.
that's okay.
And I
Try to
hope
keep.
you guys can keep up with me. And I start and then I move off. And I'm like, I hope I went back to the original
Well, we're entitled to
topic.
multi-track train tracks. Yes, we are.
My brain is all over.
But Jenna P says swords will grow to fill the space they are in. They will absolutely take over. We have had one in our 90-gallon that was over 3 feet tall and a good 15 to 8 inches in circumference. I love it. I love it. My 55-gallon, I had a Amazon sword in each corner, and where there was less water flow, that one grew completely out of the aquarium, had like 6 to 8 runners with multiple new plants on it and beautiful little white flowers. Later in the aquarium, I would say maybe 2 or 3 months later, the left one finally took off and started having runners on it. So I sold a lot of Amazon swords, and a lot of my aquariums now have those Amazon swords in it as well.
Well,
Oh,
you've mentioned that about your sword plants, and as big as mine have gotten, and maybe because I hack them back all the time, I just like hack and hack and hack. Every water change, I take off like 5 leaves, and like so I was going on saying this is almost like 3 years now, probably since setup. I finally gotten the sword plant under control where I don't have to cut its leaves anymore, unless it's just reached its end of life. But I finally have them now where they're shorter and kind of where I want them to be. So if you do keep cutting the outside, you can eventually control its growth. But it took me 3 years. And
yeah.
like you mentioned, the one that's in the high flow has not grown as high as the one in the low flow. So that's interesting. How
Yeah,
this
it's mainly because it doesn't allow sediment around the plant under a high flow. It keeps the
Mhm.
circulation from those nutrients. But trimming my plant, I rarely did. I would only take off leaves that were severely holy and yellow.
Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
But I wasn't concerned about
Well,
controlling the growth.
mine would get that way because they were touching the surface, and then as soon as they touched the surface, they would kind of start to look not so good. So if you have like a larger aquarium, I mean, they're great for those aquariums. But if you have the 40-gallon and smaller, I mean, there's a caveat here. The way, because I set it up with 1 inch of soil, it just like fed those plants. And the one that I put in the 20 gallon, um, it's very small. It's staying like 8 to 10 inches tall, and its leaves are looking translucent, like they're not growing thick and green. So different aquariums.
Yep.
Give it more
Probably
food, they'll grow.
probably different food source, different filtration in that aquarium as well. That
Yeah,
you
that
don't
one
have.
just was started with gravel. Now, um, and I don't do there should be nutrition down in there, but that makes me question my layering again and the choice of top layer. Um, I wonder, can my nutrition get down in there to feed the plants? I just have the mom will sit on top of the sand, and
Hmm.
it kind of doesn't work its way down in there.
Yeah, your sand is doing what my um the black sandblasting sand from Tractor Supply. The
Hmm.
mulch sits on top, so
Hmm.
the sand is denser. And
I'm thinking it compacts too. Like
yeah,
it's
it's
just gotten
denser and it
compacted.
compacts. Yeah, and so when that brown mold shows up, I just do a surface vac,
Yeah.
and you have to change your filtration out too. So you have a question on the screen from My Fish Tanks Aquatics. You care to touch on it?
That'll have to be a topic for another live stream. I don't want to go there today.
Okay, I'll pull it off the screen.
I
To
think
be
we could just focus on the 20 gallon and maybe my first setup, or that was the first one. Then I set up the deep substrate. Then I went back to the 20 and added sand on top of the gravel. So you could consider that the second setup
okay.
because of that. Yeah, I don't want to touch the third aquarium today. I think
So
just
do you want to
too many
magnify
topics.
on just one aquarium right now that you're having problems with, and put out the information again for those that are just now coming in, so that we can maybe help troubleshoot what's going on in that one aquarium?
Um,
Because we don't want you to get burnt out to where you want to get rid of all of your tanks. So,
I think it's the topic of like I've been wanting to do like an updated video that just addresses substrate and picking a good, just understanding the layering, understanding um, what sand does, how it, how well plants grow in sand, and I know from my experience, um, I'm wondering if over time just the sand might not have been the best top layer. So I'm questioning that. And then I went to, because of that, with the anoxic setup, I went with the biggest granules sand I could find, like bigger than the pool filter sand,
yeah.
because I was starting to think in my, I have two 40-gallon breeders, and the one, see if I can do this mirrored for you all. So, here, if you're looking at the aquariums, this is the deep substrate father fish, and this is my anoxic setup. And I wasn't sure if I was going to do saltwater in that or not. And I finally decided to just do black sand, freshwater, and just have kind of, I guess, the contrast. Because you kind of get tired over time of, you do. I mean, I didn't think I'd ever go to black sand, but I guess I did get tired of white
White or
sand.
mm-hmm.
So it's nice to have the contrast. And anyway, so I went with the larger sand size, and I didn't really look at anything else other than the size of sand. And that's why I don't really want to get into the topic of that aquarium, but it has to do with that. It has to do with um, what do you need to look
Substrates.
at with your substrate,
Yeah.
and maybe you shouldn't get so. For me, I should have looked at a broader array of
First,
substrates.
first of all, most of us pick substrate by our eye appeal, correct?
Hmm.
I want my aquarium to look a certain way.
I
When I
think with
say,
substrate, yeah.
when
That's for
I
sure.
set up Rod's 40 breeder for him, I gave him, he walked around in my fish room because I have multiple different kinds of substrates everywhere.
Hmm.
He goes, I don't like the look of that. I don't like the look of that. I like the look of the gravel. So we went to Home Depot and bought some of the River Rock, the small one, the medium size. And, excuse me. And so that was the look that he said he wanted because in my 40-gallon, I have a riverbed of the River Rock. And then on the surrounding corners, I have the black Eco Complete, which you really can't see because my river rock is bordered by larger river stones. And so the Eco Complete was planted or put down mainly for my plants because I know sometimes starting new plants in gravel, and especially a new aquarium, you don't have the mulm and detritus and stuff like that in that gravel to nourish your plants. So when I started both 40 gallons, it was personal preference. And then with mine, I had purpose. My purpose was I want a riverbed look on the front of my aquarium, but I want good plant growth all around the edges. And then I started bringing in the dwarf sword plants along the edges. I still have no plants in my gravel on my 40. Um, Matter of fact, that's where I do most of my gravel vacuuming when I do clean that aquarium because that's where a lot of the food falls
Hmm.
and I like to see the fish eat. So that was purpose. Understanding the deep substrate. Um, I never went with dirted uh, base layers. I never went that way. I never got that formula. I just wasn't interested in what if was the mess going to be if
Hmm.
that dirt ever came out from underneath that top. So I never went with dirted substrates. But I had gravel substrates in just about all of my aquariums that I went deep substrate. So I added the 2 to 3 inches of sand, and most of them are sand blasting sand caps. And my 20 tall was the one that had all of the problems. I
Can you
kept
say how thick of a cap you put on?
it's 2.5 inches on top of a inch and a half gravel. And are you getting sound effects from my mic?
No.
Okay.
I
Um,
was tapping. I hope you didn't hear the tapping.
I did.
Sorry.
I thought somebody was knocking at a door.
Mm.
But in that aquarium, my main problem was overfeeding. He, I was told to take the HOB off of that tank because it kept getting clogged up with the brown mold. So I did for a while, and I had one sponge filter in that aquarium. I was losing fish because there wasn't enough oxygen exchange with just one sponge filter because that black sand, blasting sand from Tractor Supply, like we discussed already, became compacted. It didn't matter how many root feeding stem plants I put in that aquarium, they all melted back because there wasn't enough oxygen in that root system for them to survive. I put root tabs down in there. So I have potted plants in that tank, and I have one Amazon sword that's in the substrate that's really poor looking,
Mm.
but my floating plants work wonderful in that aquarium.
Mm.
So every tank with deep substrate is different. The one behind me, gravel and 2 inches of pool filter sand. That's the one that started getting black anaerobic pockets.
Mhm.
And somebody told me to put more stem root feeding plants in there. So no matter how big I know Amazon swords can get, I was putting Amazon swords like crazy all the way around that aquarium. They're not big, but the black areas have disappeared.
Hmm.
So the root system is there and established now and feeding on that anaerobic bacteria, and my pool filter sand is clean. I still have about a 1 inch really clean
Oxygenated.
oxygenated area from the surface filtration from my hang on the back.
Hmm.
And the rest of it is a little darker sand, but it's clean. It's not black.
Yeah,
So,
I've had to use root tabs for my setup that's like that with the gravel and the pool filter sand on top. And I mean, it's 1.5 maybe inches, but that sand creeps down, so it's in with the gravel. But
yes.
where you can see the line, it's like 1.5, and it stays clean. The only time I don't think I ever see pockets of black in mine, but I had sunlight coming in, so you can see the algae growing.
Yes.
And I've seen people say like that's in an anaerobic zone if you're getting those pockets of algae, but it's really just I think along the edge there where you can see it. I don't know what it would look like inside there, but yeah.
Well, what can we help you with today with your tank that's giving you the problem? Where is it, the
So
one with the balloon mollies?
I'm happy to talk about it. The test strips are showing like the pH is high, so that's um, hard to read on the test strips. Like that, those oranges. Once it gets
Yeah.
to 7.6 to like 8.2,
Yes.
I when I put that strip next to it, I can't tell if it's 7.6 or 8.2.
Right.
You just can't tell. So I don't know what my pH is in there, um, other than I guess 7.6, maybe 8.0. Who knows?
So
Somewhere in
you've got
between.
good cichlid water.
And that might be because. So I mean, it seems opposite because it's just sand. I added like mm, about 3 or 4 handfuls of the aragonite a year ago, just sitting on top of the sand.
Okay.
And then I have 3 pieces of driftwood in there with the Anubias on it. So you'd think that would cause the pH to be lower
Did
than.
it bring your KH up?
I haven't done a hardness test in a while, so I don't know.
Okay. When I set up my Shelly tank 2 weeks ago, I put a very thin layer, maybe a 1/4 inch layer of aragonite in there,
Mhm.
and then I ordered excuse me, I ordered this really fine white sand, and I cannot remember the brand name now. I got it from Amazon. Um, it wasn't correct. It might have been Caribsea white sand, and so it gave me 2 inches of sand on top of the aragonite. And actually, the Shelleys have done really well in mixing it all up. So it's kind of not so pretty because
Mhm.
now the aragonite, which is lumpy like crushed coral,
Yeah,
uh, may be smaller than crushed coral as far as grain size. Depends on where you get your aragonite. And
mine's fairly large, like gravel sized,
is
small
it
gravel sized. Yeah.
okay? Mine wasn't that coarse or that large. But anyway, one corner of that tank is about 3 inches deep in sand and aragonite mixed up, and the other area may be an inch, inch and a half. And I'm starting to get some dark shadowing in that sand. So it's time for me to do a little bit of a substrate cleaning there. It's the area where the food drops. But I pre treat.
I was asked about my pH. I think my pH has always been around 7.6.
Okay.
My source is a well. So, yeah, I've tested that and I've tested all my aquariums. I think it's just kind of, it's been going, looking like it's on the higher side of 7.6. So, I have a low end test kit liquid reader
Okay.
that I can use, and it won't test my pH because my pH is higher than that.
Okay.
That's one reason why I'm like, I probably should just get a full test kit so I can test the high side. So I think my pH naturally is always like around that 7.6. But I went into the pet store and showed him my water, and this was in the anoxic setup. And he was like, he was showing like 8.0. He's like, well, your pH is really on the acidic side, is what he told me. And I
Hmm.
was like, you mean alkaline? And he goes, no, acidic. Like he was not shakable on that point. And I was like, I know water, I know pH. I've done a lot of reading on it and testing on it. And now
Yeah,
you're
I've heard that
confusing,
argument too, and I'm like,
like,
oh,
now you're confusing me because now I'm going to have to go home and
seven's
double
always
check
been
it.
considered neutral.
Neutral. And anything below it is acidic, and anything above it is alkaline.
Yep.
So when he was saying acidic, I'm like, okay, you've said this to me in the past. And I went home and checked the chart, and I was like confirming I wasn't going crazy because this is the store owner.
Yeah.
And I went back, and he's like, your water is very acidic. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not going to argue with you. I can't. You won't be corrected. But
Yeah,
I
I
just
don't.
said, you mean alkaline? And he was like, no, acidic. So the rest of us know alkaline. My water's on the alkaline side. But I was just like, okay. So, yeah, I don't know. It's always been 7.6, so it's a little bit higher than normal. Um, and it makes sense, I guess, for the anoxic setup because I ended up adding the sand I chose had aragonite in it, and it's for marine fish.
Yeah, me too.
So I'm going, man, I didn't think it was going to be a problem. But yeah, now I'm kind of wanting to swap it out with something that won't affect my pH. So
Yeah, Jenna said that oregonite's often used to buffer the pH and bring it up to around 8.
yeah,
And
so that
mine,
made sense for that tank setup.
yep, and that's basically what's going to happen over in my little Shelly tank is I haven't done a water test uh, since I set it up. But before I do a water change, I will do a test on the tank, and then I've got a small bucket of water that I was letting sit because I added too much warm water to it, so it was almost 10 degrees warmer. Anyway, it's now cooler than the aquarium, but I'm I tested the my tap the other day, and it was, I want to say, my KH was higher than I thought out of the tap. I think it was almost 80 on the test strip. And usually, when I do a water test in any of the established tanks, I have 0 KH unless it has crushed coral or been buffered with uh, baking soda. Um,
I guess my question is like I've been trying to keep these balloon mollies. I think they're adorable, and I added like 4 to my 40-gallon deep substrate, and um, I even quarantined 3 of them and then added them. And over time, just only one has survived. And it was like the original one I put in there. And
and
that
where
little
where
girl
did you
just
get
keeps
those
on living.
fish? Did you
So
get them?
I get them from Pet Supermarket by me. That's just where I get all my fish.
Okay. And you lost the whole colony but one.
Yeah.
So I would say it could be the source that those fish came from.
Yeah, so I love them. I just want a tank of balloon mollies, and it's like
And growing up the
happening.
fry probably is going to require learning what food source to get to them and how often to do your water changes. Always with fry, I do small water changes, not to. That's when I would lose a lot of my guppies because I would have too much fluctuation in the pH. And next thing you know, I can't find any fry after a water change.
Yeah, it happened to me. Um, my well water is not hard. Um, so I guess so. I'm wondering, is he talking about
Yeah,
the
usually it's
pH being higher?
yeah, because usually well sources come through a lot of limes and other types of stones, but it depends on the area that you're living in as to what your foundational.
Yeah, my well is a shallow well, and my neighbor's well is deeper than mine, and she has nice hard water. So she
Okay.
was able to like
Yeah,
have.
you're getting surface water then on
I
your
can't
water
keep
table.
I can't keep mystery snails alive, and she was growing them like they were growing like crazy. She fed them a lot,
Yeah,
and they were growing like crazy for her. I'm like, I can't keep mine alive. And I tested her water. I was like, let me see what your water is compared to mine. So I brought my test kit over, and I was like, oh, yeah, yours is harder than mine. Like hers
mhm,
is 8 degree, I think GH, and mine is 3 degree. So
that's
hard
crazy.
water.
Jenna
But
P is also saying, does Cassie B know her GH? I think most live bearers prefer harder, higher GH water.
well, so I just said it. It's
Yeah,
3 degrees.
yeah.
And then so unless I add calcium or something, which is what I was doing, I was.
Yeah, my
I don't know if you
water
missed it.
hardness is almost 300. It's off the scale here.
You guys might have missed it. I was kind of chasing pH a little recently since my pH seemed to be high. I'm like, well, how can I measure it better? Um, I have the digital meter, so I go around with the digital meter, and the digital meter doesn't agree with the test strips, so it was saying like 6.8.
Hmm.
I'm going, maybe I'm just not using this digital meter right.
Yeah, my digital meter has to be calibrated again. It's 1 degree off on the pH. So when it tells me my pH is 5.0, it's actually 6.0 in the water, and it has to be calibrated. Um,
Maybe
do
mine's
you
10 degrees off.
do you ever do any TDS testing, which is not?
So I started with the TDS meter because someone early on was like, you need to get yourself a TDS meter. So I did. Um, and I checked my TDS for a while, and I would do water changes to keep it like below 200. And then I just stopped using the TDS. But now, since I'm kind of chasing the pH again, I was in on Lucas's live stream, and he started talking about don't chase the pH. So I went and watched that video,
Yeah,
and he was saying like it changes so much you can't really get a good accurate reading, and he realized on the TDS meter. So he was saying if your TDS is below 200, that usually means your pH is low, and if your TDS is above that, your pH is on the higher side. So he says it's like a what would you call that? Linear relationship.
okay. I got to take a break and I'll be right back.
Alrighty. Yeah. So, anyways, that was Lucas's advice. So I did test my TDS, and um, it was showing like 265, and I was like, okay, well that's a little smidge higher than normal. So I did. I had just done a water change, and it was showing 265 after the water change. So it had been 2 or 3 days later when I did that, and I was like, well, maybe I'll do another water change. And I had just done the first one because the one Molly um, had passed away. So I was like, well, I guess I waited too long between water changes. So then I watched Lucas's video. He said go test the TDS, so I did, and I was like, maybe I need to lower that and get it below closer to 200. So I did another water change 3 days later, and it got it down. And it's only a 10% water change, so I did a 10% water change, waited 3 days, and I had done another 10% water change, and it got my TDS down to 215. So I was like, well, that's a good number. I'm happy with that. And then a couple days later, another Molly died. I was like, oh crap, I did too many water changes too soon. So that was because I listened to Lucas.
Silver Creek says he was suckered into getting a useless TDS meter. I use them mainly out.
Well, what are your guys' opinion of using TDS as a gauge for your pH? Because that's
No,
what
I
Lucas said.
don't for my pH. I do it for my ponds outside because they're covered. They don't get rainwater um, to bring the TDS or the pH down because my rainwater is acidic, and I don't know if most people's rainwater is acidic. Um,
I've never tested mine. I know my pond water is closer to neutral.
good.
So, I mean, I could just take my pond water and do water changes with that if I want to lower my pH. But I don't. I don't touch the pond.
A lot of times my TDS gets really high outside, so I know it's time for some water changes.
So I was saying, rather than going in blind, it's nice to know what your parameters are to maybe see what's the culprit of the like a fish fin deteriorating a little bit, then just a tiny bit. I mean, I see that, and I do a water
How
change,
old is
and
that tank?
their fins recover right after the water change.
Okay.
So that usually fixes it. I
Yeah.
don't worry about it too much. I'm like, oh, it's just time for water change.
How old is that tank where you see the fins?
That happens with my mollies. I have the one molly in the 40-gallon that's now like going on 3 years. And then the other one, um, it's probably 6 years, but 3 with the sand. So before that, I was doing gravel vacuums, and now I just siphon that
The
that
mold.
mold from the driftwood. I don't even think that's fish waste down in there. It could be, but it seems more like it's the driftwood organic material.
Yeah. Um, Somebody told me when I had the crash in my rainbow fish tank, the 55, they said something acidic is, causing, the drops in the pH. And I tried rescuing those rainbows and putting them in just buckets of water with aeration and heaters and stuff like that. And they would jump out of the buckets and commit suicide. And then some of them would just belly up anyway. And that 55-gallon was an what we call had old tank syndrome going on.
Mm-hmm.
The I probably needed to get rid of all driftwood out of that tank because they were they were putting off uh, wood rot, whatever.
Or
The
maybe just do more like weekly water changes instead of once a month.
Yeah, I needed to up the water. But anyway, I lost the whole colony of rainbows, and so I got completely burnt out and could care
Yeah,
less. I sold the tank.
that'll do it. So I wondered for a while if the soil that I added in the 40-gallon dollar fish setup was just too much nutrition making its way through the sand, even though I have a good 3-inch layer of sand on there. I wondered if that still can somehow get into the water column. And I've had talks about this before with other people, and like with Mary when we were doing our live streams together, and she agreed that the 1 inch is probably too much. Um, I think she didn't do that much with any of her setups. She did less. So, I mean, short of starting that setup over.
I want to address this comment that Sketty Nona put up. She says, so TDS matters more from your source of water rather than the tank water. Um, I don't agree with that statement, or I know she's got question marks there. Um, it doesn't matter more from your source of water, it's just another knowledge added, a source of testing. All TDS is measuring the total dissolved solids within the water column. It's not telling you what's causing the density of the water. All it's telling me is that I need to do a water change, and then I know there's specific levels of TDS metering for specific species like shrimp keeping. Um, Goldfish will definitely have higher TDS because they are dirty, pollutant fish. They eat and they poop. They eat and they poop. The same as plecos, the same as um, some larger breeds of snails. You're going to have a higher TDS mainly because it's telling you your water's dirty to me. I'm not a scientist. I don't know exactly what dissolved solids are, but I know that if you keep topping off your water instead of doing water changes, you're going to have higher levels of TDS because all you're doing is diluting the solids that's in the water column. You're not really exchanging them. You're not taking anything out and replacing with new nutrients, etc.
I agree with the last statement, and I think it's good to know what your source is, just to know what you're starting TDS. Like that's how you know when you add water. It's how you know what your TDS is, because over time it's going to change. Because if you're not doing the water changes, it's going to creep up. Um, but then if you're adding stuff, I agree with Nano Aquarium. If you're adding your GH and KH, it helps to know that starting point so you know how much GH and KH to add and then test it again and you can see what that did to your TDS. And then that's where you want to be. So if your TDS is changing at that point, if you need to add more GH or KH because that TDS is going to lower eventually and if you did a water change, it's going to lower. So it's good to know your start. When you add stuff, it's good to know what that is at that point.
Yeah, it gives
But
you a base.
and if it's creeping up, it's telling you need to do a water change. Um, but if you're doing, like you said, the top offs, your TDS will creep up. You know, that makes sense. However, if you're doing regular water changes and you're doing top offs, in
It's not
my
going.
head, you might have to do an extra water change to lower that TDS, you know, because I'm just thinking that a normal water change might not bring that down. To me, I'm thinking you would have to change a little bit more water if you have just been doing top offs.
Yeah,
Then you did a water change. You might have to do a little more, take out a little more water at that point if that's all you've been doing is top offs. So,
well, I know Father Fish used to just top off, and but he had, like you said, he had RO systems running in certain places in his fish room. Then he had the big stock tubs with filter media in it that he was using as a filtration system. That might have been connected to his RO water. I'm not sure how he, I didn't watch enough of his programs to find out why he had stock tubs with filtration in it, because a lot of times he said he'd come in where the suction got disconnected and it be running dry, and then he'd lose a lot of water in one tank because somebody wasn't troubleshooting blah 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 behind his back. And so he was running into some problems with the stock tank filtrations, because a lot of times I'm wanting to set these black tubs up here as a central filtration system for my fish room, but in my brain I haven't figured out how to do it. I got off topic, but I wanted to bring up Jenna's comment here. Certain driftwood can reduce the pH, and some stones can affect the pH as well. Because Holy Texas Rock will definitely bring your KH up and help buffer, like aragonite sand and crushed corals and eggshells and blah blah blah. But when I studied the crushed coral effect and the aragonite effect on your water column, it only releases what is needed within the water column. Once it buffers to a certain point, it holds and contains its calcium element content. It only if your pH begins to drop in the water column is when that stone in the aragonite will start releasing calcium again into the water column. It's almost like a living source. It only releases when it's needed because it's made by nature to buffer. Buffer is a sealing within the water column. It doesn't go above, it doesn't release more than what is needed.
Yeah, and my 40-gallon where I lost the mollies, and let's just say my pH is pretty much 7.6 to 7.8, possibly 8.0 in the 20, and the new anoxic setup. But so it's fairly much the same, and um, the Father Fish Aquarium doesn't have any driftwood. It just had the rocks in there that I collected from a local waterway, and I think those are just man-made rocks. And I don't think they have anything in them other than some fossils and some concrete.
Yeah. Now, see, concrete you got to be careful with as well. It can leach stuff into the water column that can be unpleasant to things that are not used to living in it. Now, in some city,
Yeah,
um,
I was just looking for an affordable hardscape to add, and went look. I didn't. We're in Florida, and there's like no rocks here.
I'm
We
so
make our
sorry.
own rocks. That's all I could find and collect.
The Nano Aquarium guys said, I guess TDS would be important if you have a low GH and KH and somehow the pH is high. At least another clue to figure out what's in the water. It can be informational for all of that that's on the test strip, you know, the TDS. But like you said, you've got to know what your TDS was before you got started, and as the aquarium ages, what changes are taking place.
Mm-hmm.
And our aquariums change with our feeding, our uh, how many fish are actually in the aquarium, uh, what decor you have in your aquarium, what substrates and even what plants you have in your aquarium. And it changes with our filtration. Your filtration media gets old and it stops producing healthy beneficial bacteria and then it starts producing toxins. So if we're not watching all of those things in our aquarium, those are factors that change everything in our tanks,
Yeah.
whether it's healthy or not.
My one anoxic aquarium, I think, is causing some of my confusion because of the substrates, that the top layer I chose. And so I started replacing some of that with the flugel stratum because my sword plants weren't doing good in it. And these are dwarf swords.
Okay.
And then when I added plants, I started getting an outbreak of hair algae, and that's growing on the driftwood. And I just go in and manually take it out. But
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't have any algae in there until I added plants. And then probably kicking around the substrate has caused an outbreak of blackbeard algae. Um, Ideally you would get the substrate correct So I probably should not have gone with the aragonite black sand. I didn't know they had like a non-aragonite version. If I had known that, I would have
I
gone
didn't
with it.
either.
I didn't know it till after I set it up. So again, I guess I didn't do a good enough broad search, and I was maybe being a little too specific in my search, and that's how I ended up with that. And when you do kind of a more generic search, then like you can find the Alex talks about it. Alex has a great video, and I was like, I need to watch Alex's video and just watch him. I've
Yeah,
been
when I wanna
absorbing
geek
video.
out on science, I listen to Alex because it just feeds me.
He has a great substrate video, which then made me want to make my own substrate video in my style, because
Yeah.
not everyone can keep up with Alex, or the topics that are important to me maybe weren't touched on heavily by Alex. So, anyways, I wanted to make my own video, and that's where I was about to. Um,
That's the beauty of this hobby, and any hobby, but still, some of us are more science based, and some of us are very uh, common lay members, just who say, "Please give it to me in simple form. I can't handle all that complex." And then there's moments when, like you said, Alex will start on something, but he doesn't get to the meat of what you're looking for. So now it's your turn to take
or
off.
that happens a lot in some videos. Like the person will very quickly touch on it and move on, and you're like, oh, that was
Give
the
me
most
more.
important part.
Give me more.
I like, no, wait, you only like said it for a second. So that was important to me, but not important to the person talking. And I'm like, oh God, like, no, I want to know more about that. So oftentimes I'll rewind the video to like, where did they talk about that? And for like 30 seconds they talk about it. I'm trying to find where in the video they talked about it, and just re-listen and re-listen and re-listen. Like, did I get all the information that I needed from that part? So that happens.
Oh,
That happens quite a bit. I hope I don't do that, because I'll listen to, like, I'm editing a video that's going to be released hopefully today. I think after I paused, publishing it for the live stream to be here with you. I
oh, I
didn't get it
appreciate it.
finished yesterday.
So
Worked
is it
very
up?
hard on it.
So is
And
it up?
it's very close to being published. I just want to do like a final preview of it, and then
Okay.
I'll
So
upload it.
look for it, guys.
It's not on fish at all. It's I've been on a garden
Oh, I love those
streak.
videos. Yes.
So I've been doing more outdoorsy videos.
I've
Um,
enjoyed them.
so I was listening to it though, and I'm like, I'll hear myself speak, and I might have cut it out, because I was like, you know what? That word sounds like I'm saying dat instead of that. And I guess when I'm talking kind of fast, like it went that, it went like that, and I'm like, do I say that like that? I was like, maybe I don't
Well,
pronunciate
if you
certain
say
words.
it enough, we'll get used to it and know what it is.
So I think that happens. I might be speaking quick, or um, even my family noticed it, and they were like, what are you saying? Because we don't talk fast necessarily, but we'll say two or three words together really fast,
Hmm.
and they go,
It's a phrase. Yep.
That's mostly the American language, though, is like that. And that's why we
Hmm.
have so many words,
Our
and
dialects. Yep.
foreigners can't understand us. But it's not because we're talking fast, it's just because we may not pronunciate every single word. You know, we just blur
Articulately. Yep.
it.
Where it's intelligible. I
So
like what
it's like, to
Geek
me, it
Boy.
made perfect sense. I'm like, I'm saying this, but they were hearing me say like one word, and I was like, it was three words. I'm like, no, I said this. Anyway, so
I
like
like
I
what
cut that
Geek
out of the
Boy
video.
said about the banana tree leaves detoxing concrete contaminants, because I watch a lot of those DIYs in different countries who are doing those beautiful outside ponds, and then they're cutting up banana tree leaves in it, and they leave it, and they say 3 days later they scoop them out, then they take all the water out, then they refill it, then they add the fish. And I'm like, why are they doing that? They're not explaining why they're doing that. But I believe because they use a concrete sand gravel combination when they're using the mortar to put their bricks and things together when they're doing their DIY ponds and stuff. And I watch all of that. Of course, it's time lapsed, but I love those type of DIY. I'm like, where can I put that type of pond outside? And
Yeah,
Rod goes, in your dreams.
some
I
of
said,
that might be
I said,
true.
I said, give me some of that crete. But if there's anybody in chat, I don't know how much more time Cassie has, but if there's anyone in chat that's also having a problem in their aquarium and they seem like they're not getting anywhere with it, and it's frustrating you, you're not only losing fish, but you're not being able to solve the issue with water testing and the type of substrate you might have. You might have to remove your substrate and start over. You know, I've done that several times and I got so angry. I just threw all of the substrate out and said, I don't care how much this substrate costs me. It's causing a problem and I'm just going to go back to basics. I'm going to even get me some colored gravel,
Well,
but I
I
don't.
don't, I haven't gotten to the point of starting over yet on any of the aquariums, but I know if I were to start over, I guess at this point in my knowledge of the aquariums, I know I would do less soil. I've said that in the past. I would,
Yeah.
if I did set it up again, I would try with the less soil. However, I might do, even that could be too much soil because MD went from, I think he was watching You Know Who and tried soil and then was having issues with it. And I was having similar issues with cyanobacteria outbreaks. You know, I think, like he had mentioned, the nutrition, no matter how much sand you have on there, they're so nutritious. I think you can still get it into the water column. So if you're getting cyanobacteria, I think that's from the soil that you're adding. Um, and then he eventually
Mine
stopped
showed
using
up without
soil.
soil.
Yeah. Well, he ended up switching to, you know, he just uses gravel, like well seasoned gravel, and then he tops that with sand. So I'm thinking I might not even do soil and I might do a more expensive substrate. I mean, the whole reason we were doing soil was initially just to keep costs down. And I'm at the point now where I'm like, I kind of care less about costs. I mean, within reason, but I'm I would be maybe okay with spending $30 on a good bag, a bagged item
Yeah.
that would add that nutrition, but wouldn't give me the headache that soil gives.
Who is it? Greg Sage that has the clear bottom aquariums and all of his plants are in clay pots. He's got multiple clay pots in all of his aquariums.
I don't like that
His
look.
plants
Would never
grow.
do that.
It's easy to clean.
I know somebody who did that.
I've got
I
three right
don't know who
now
that
that
was.
have no substrate in them, and the mold builds up, and it's in the pleco grow outs, and then my other 40 breeders a catch all whenever I get new stock in. I guess it's kind of like my quarantine tank. Everything goes in there, and I don't do um, the trio meds or nothing because am, I'm kind of old school, and we were taught in old school you don't add meds unless you have to because then your fish becomes immune to the medication when you really need it to act on a strong parasite. And the most um, my favorite anti-parasite right now has been that goat wormer and that I got from my co-op, my local co-op, and it's called Safeguard, and it's got 10% uh, febendazole in it, and it it took out that hydra with one treatment, and I have never had hydra before in all my life. My hydra was pink because they were eating my red shrimp, and they take on the color of the food source that they are
I
eating.
had I had Hydra, but it was like probably not big, like a big hydra problem. I think I saw one or two, and it was in a new setup. And I don't think I've ever seen it again. Didn't bother me.
I started feeding a little heavier on my shrimp because of Grant telling me, this is the season for them to spawn, so you need to get them ready and stuff like that. Because I told him I was losing all of my females. I've got nothing but males in that strain. So I've actually ended up mixing that strain with some really strong cherry shrimp. It was a fire red shrimp.
I haven't
And
gotten into shrimp too much. I think with my low GH, it's hard to have shrimp unless I add something like
yeah,
calcium.
just put a bag of crushed coral in there.
I don't know.
And I feed mine Tums every once in a while.
Well, and then that's like the reason why a hang on back is nice, but my hang on back is packed with media, so I can't really put crushed
I
coral.
put a bag of crushed coral in, and then I put a bushy Amazon sword around it, and nobody ever sees it.
Yeah, so
But you know it's there. I know.
I'm down to 2 balloon mollies though, and I kind of had said if I was gonna try them out one more time, and if they didn't work out, then I guess I was gonna stop. Because even the fish store owner said he had trouble with balloon mollies as well, and he gave up on them, and I wasn't ready to give up on them yet. So I don't know what I'll put in there next if I don't do balloon mollies anymore, or if I should just keep adding them and just keep seeing it. Maybe it was just I did too much at once, and I
And I'm
might.
sure you've done your research on decorations and temperature and tank mates. Is it species only aquarium?
I'm like preferring species only. Um,
What temperature do you have that tank at?
like 80.
You might want to drop the temp a little bit. It could be too warm for them.
Mm.
This one here says 72 to 78.
Well, our house is typically around 76, except for the winter time.
Well,
Can get up
70,
to 78.
yeah, that's good. And then what are you feeding them?
I'm feeding this tropical. I don't know
Is it
what
a flake?
brand this is. I don't know.
A flake or a granule?
It's a granule.
Granule.
Um,
And they're eating really well for you?
I'm feeding like the micro one though. This is like a shrimp delight food, but
Uh-huh.
it's the smaller of the foods. I don't know if that's
Kind of
too
like a
small for them.
two meal, 3 meal, something like that.
Maybe it's too small. I wonder if it's too small and I'm like underfeeding them. That's my worry.
Hmm. How do they act when you do feed them? If they're acting like they're starving,
Starving.
you might need to
I'll
feed
do
them a
like
little.
I'll do a good old sprinkle across the aquarium, and then sometimes I'll come back if they'll finish that like in 30 seconds. And sometimes I'll come back and do another good sprinkle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just trial and error with them.
Someone said feed the brine shrimp. I just like the frozen brine shrimp to have to like thaw that out and feed the fish every day.
Yeah, I don't feed them brine shrimp every day. I use it as a treat.
I
Maybe once.
should. I guess if I don't do it every day, I forget to go do that and do the weekly feeding. I get lazy.
Yeah.
Don't do it. It's like you either do it every day or you don't.
Yeah, they
But
need more greens in their diet, like algae wafers, the spirulina flakes. You can even put lettuce and zucchini and spinach in their diet.
I have algae wafers I could drop in a tab. Yeah.
And check, make sure they're not constipated and their bowels are moving well.
Yep, sketty. Um, I just recently bought that Fluvastratum, and it's a small bag. It's expensive. That's why I haven't quite replaced all of my um, substrate around. But yeah, I was watching Alex's video to try to figure out what substrate would be better.
I have used the Fluval stratum once for a shrimp and plant tank. Let's
Mhm.
see.
It helped with my plant growth, not so much in the anoxic setup, but in the father fish setup when I sprinkled it on, because we were talking about the sand compacting, and I was thinking like the roots just maybe are not
Getting
moving
through.
around and
Yeah.
getting through. Um, so I sprinkled it on. It's like it doesn't hurt to try it. So I sprinkled it on top. If that doesn't fix it, then it's probably a compaction issue with the sand. But I did get a lot of growth in not every plant, but in my lily took off. My post started doing better,
Okay.
and my wisteria just got it's like really spreading out and now making like a huge. It's just sitting on a surface from one plant.
Uh-huh.
So I cut it off and I tried to replant the new cut off, and that just melted and didn't
Yeah,
take.
you need to let it float after you cut it
Oh,
and then let the roots begin to
okay.
form and then plant that because it will rot at
So
the bottom.
I've
But
let the floaters hang out and they've been developing roots. But yeah, I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it prefers to be a floating plant than a.
oh, it does. Most of my water wisteria floats. I tried planting it and it ends up getting uprooted anyway.
But it's turning yellow near the surface. Not all of like the floater ones
Hmm.
are turning yellow. They're getting like out covered in algae and they're floating. And I guess because they're under the light, so maybe it's too much light for
Yeah,
them.
it could be too much direct light. I just have LEDs on mine and
Yeah, but this is why the hobby is hard.
yeah,
It
everything.
confuses me so much.
But just keep trial and error and find what works for you. Um, what works for me in my fish room are the fish that survive.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
get happy. They get happy on their own and I don't know they're happy. Like I'm trying barbs now. I'm going to get some polar blue.
I haven't tried barbs because I don't. I like their coloring, but they're not the most attractive fish to me. So every
Um
time I go and I'm like, I'll get a barb and end up getting something else, like a Danny
I
note.
liked those Denison barbs that are also known as roseline sharks. Those were pretty. In a
Hmm.
in my 55.
Well, I was like, the cherry barbs have a lot of color, but
Yeah,
just the face shape to me is strange.
yeah. I'm getting ready to get some Odessa barbs, and they're a black ruby barb. And I've got these barbs, and I think they're called melon barbs. They're marked like the tiger barbs, but they don't have the balloon shape that the tiger barbs have. These are more oval instead of cylindrical. So,
Mm,
and they're very skittish. You know, they need
mm.
lots of plants. They'll come out and swim as long as I'm not in front of the tank. But I'm getting ready to have to get to work on my
Yeah,
laundry. I
yeah, it's
really,
getting to that time.
I really appreciate you being my special guest today. I want to thank everyone who showed up. I do believe we had about 21 people at one time. Thank all of the mods for sharing their links. I'm sorry, Jenna P. I didn't get to show your link that you had earlier. I believe it was about the tweezers on Amazon. Yeah.
I didn't even get to talk about one thing I wanted to talk about, so we might have to do this another time.
Okay.
It's like that'll get us kind of too off topic.
Well, make a note so that you know that's what we're going to do next time.
Yeah, there's
And
several things we haven't gotten into. Like I thought we might talk about lighting today, and yeah, that's just a whole other
A whole nother day, I
for
think.
me.
Yeah.
I didn't want
I
to get
use so
so
many
there.
different, I'm a DIY person, so I've even used table lamps for lighting.
I have two. Yes.
But thanks, guys. I hope you all have a blessed Friday. Again, thank you, Cassie B, for being my special guest.
Oh, I appreciate you for having me. So thanks for letting me come up.
I did have other plans, but the weather knocked out my trip to Georgia, so we're not going to go to Georgia today. We were going to pick up some chairs, and rain and chairs just don't work. But
Worked out for
anyway.
me then.
But we hope you all have a blessed weekend, and we'll see you again on Tuesday night. And then when Cassie B and I can get together again, we're definitely going to do another pop up. So, again, thank you guys. God bless you.
And I hope it was helpful.
Oh, I believe there was a lot of information in this. But thanks again, sweetheart. God
Thank
bless
you.
you. And we shall see you next time.
All right.
Susan for SLC Aquatics, hashtag FishFamMom, touching lives one fish at a time. Love you. Bye bye.